Pastor Doug. We now continue with part 15 in our series entitled A Survey of Paul's Letter to the Romans. Before we leave this subtopic of grace of God and return to the letter of Paul to the Romans, there is one more issue concerning the grace of God that we must address, and that is its abuse. Grace is not a license to sin. Believers abuse the grace principle when they take the attitude that they can live any way they choose, since salvation once received cannot be lost. While it is true that salvation cannot be lost, it does not mean that there aren't consequences for the post-salvation sins we commit. Post-salvation sins results in divine discipline, Hebrews 12:6, here on earth, and the loss of eternal rewards that the same believer could have otherwise received if he or she had made better choices. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 12 through 15. Although salvation cannot be lost, divine discipline should not be taken lightly. It can range from anything up to and including physical death. Acts chapter 5. When a believer is only concerned with what benefits there are in store for him or her, it is obvious that such a believer, although heaven-bound, is still very much self-centered. Just as an honorable child relishes the praise and approval of his or her earthly parents, so does the child of God seek the approval of his or her heavenly Father. The Christian disciple needs no further motivation to glorify God than to know that what he or she does or doesn't do brings honor or shame to our calling. There is no place for self-centeredness in the life of a disciple. The throne of our lives is not a two-seater. In Romans chapter 2, verse 5, Paul returns to the subject of judgment concerning those who respond to God's kindness, tolerance, and patience, noted in verse 4, with stubbornness and unrepentance of heart, verse 5, who, and I quote, are storing up wrath for yourself in the day of wrath and revelation of the righteousness, judgment of God. Paul, verse 6, then makes reference to Psalms 62:12, who, referring to God, will render to each person according to his deeds. Salvation is not worked for, so we need to take a further look at when, where, and how, and on what basis the deeds of both believers and unbelievers are evaluated, and when and where the results will be experienced. In some ways, both believers and unbelievers reap the seeds that they have sown while here on earth. God blesses and disciplines his children, and Satan, Luke 4:6, blesses and rewards his children or servants during their earthly lifetime. Some of God's blessings are eternal in nature and will not be experienced by those who are to receive them until the millennial kingdom and